Welcome to the One Mic, One Voice show, Building the Collective Conscious, a show that's created to give space where your voice, ideas, and informed opinions can be heard, appreciated, and debated. I am Michael Eric Owens, back in the One Mic studio, folks. I had to come to you. I was motivated by this idea of an attack, an all-out assault on teaching Black history. And these new standards in Florida, which I'm going to get into in just a few minutes. But I wanted to, when I heard about this story and Ron DeSantis and his pursuit of eliminating all things minority and all things LGBTQ plus, I thought it would be good to just give my take on it. Now, again, it's just my take, but I want to share some of my thoughts. And I was when I thought about this, Frederick Douglass came to mind, because Frederick said, once you learn to read, you will be free. This idea of a historical effort to keep Black people, minorities, uneducated. This is the old playbook. This is nothing fancy, nothing new, nothing creative. It's the old playbook. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, I'm going to read this quote from him. He said, the function of the university or function of a school is not simply to teach breadwinning or to furnish teachers for the public schools or to be a center of polite society. It is, above all, to be the organ of that fine adjustment between real life and the growing knowledge of life, an adjustment which forms the secrets of civilization. That's Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. But you know that he talks about here, this quote is the adjustments between real life and the growing knowledge of life. There's so much we don't understand. There's so much that the information has been withheld from us. There's so much not in the history books. There's so much not being taught in school that keeps society, especially in a democracy, ignorant. Because when you lack information, you cannot make informed decisions. And Du Bois is 100% correct. The function of any educational system, which the definition of education is the process of receiving or giving systemic instruction. The challenge has always been in America is this system of education is tilted. It's tilted in the favor of a white male dominated society. And so everything you're taught, or everything I have been taught, mostly has been seen through the white gaze. In other words, they are the central figure. And that's reinforced throughout our society, not only in politics, but also in music, also in, you look at the arts, you look at any type of hero movie. Who's always the hero? It's the white male. And that reinforces this idea that particular history, which is important. Everyone's history is important. Everyone's history should be shared. Everyone's history should be, I think, disseminated to the masses. So I'm not sitting up here saying that the contributions that our white brothers and sisters have made to this country should not be highlighted. But I think they are, because we see them all over the place. It is those that have been tossed to the periphery of society that are not being heard or seen. And this has been the constant struggle to be seen. As Ralph Ellison wrote, an invisible man. This idea that I know I exist. That's not a problem with me, but it's through the eye gate in which you look at me. That's where the blurry vision comes into play. And so these inequities that already exist in the system, because the system was designed not to include the other, it was designed only for white folks. And then we had the Brown versus Board of Education. We had that decision, and that opened up the doorway for blacks to enter into diverse schools. You had busing, you had the pseudo I think segregation when it came to education in Milwaukee, where I'm from, in the early 60s and 70s, and so this quest to continue to remove black and brown people from the educational system. And Florida, there's been an outrage across the nation this week because of the new standards for African American history. Suggesting, get this, folks, suggesting that, and I hope you've heard this, but I thought it was outrageous, suggesting that slaves benefited from slavery. Really? I mean, do we really want to go there? I mean, does this even make sense to you? So I come and I oppress you, but yet you are going to benefit from that oppression. The very definition of oppression does not have any logical benefits from it. It's oppression. It's the loss of your own self-agency, the loss of your ability to make your own decisions, the loss of your day-to-day life and what that constitutes as far as your own empowerment, your own self-determination to be what you want to be. Folks, there was no benefit. Now, the logic comes out of this is this. Okay. Slaves didn't know anything when they came here. Now, let's back up just for a moment. When Africans came to this country, they were not of a single tribe, because if you know anything about the continent, I spent 6 months on the continent. I have a lot of friends that are still on the continent and that are in the United States. You know that there are thousands of tribes, thousands of languages, and most Africans identify themselves not by their country nor their tribe, but their clan. And so you have this 3-tier identity, right? Where you really want to get down to it. So, contrary to what this philosophy would say, is that when they came here, they were ignorant, they had no skills, and because of slavery, because of the master's grace, they were allowed to learn skills. But what we do know is that these folks were not skillless. They were, what do you think? They were living out in the wild? How did they eat if they didn't cultivate the land? How would they have housing if they were not builders? I said I was on the continent for 6 months. I brought back, man, let me tell you something. There are some amazing carpenters, woodworkers on the continent. I brought back some beautiful, beautiful art pieces from Africa. And we do know, if we do just a little research, we know that slaves, Africans, okay, because they were enslaved here, chattel slavery, meaning that they were owned as property, as you own a car or you own a house or you own a spark plug. They were considered property, nothing more. Constitution said 3/5 of a person. Okay. But we know that when slaves arrived, they had wide-ranging skills. They were pottery makers, weavers, wood carving, metalworking. They were builders. when they came. And matter of fact, that skill set helped establish this country. That those skills we're still benefiting from today because the wealth of this country came through those skill set. Okay. These skills proved valuable in the early American experience. And it says here that particularly during the pre-industrial colonial period when common household goods such as thread, fabric, and soap were all made by hands. The Africans that came here already had that skill. Some were planters. Okay. Some knew how to grow rice already. And if you know anything about the early rice economy, the rice, the sugar, the tobacco, that slaves came with knowledge of how to cultivate the soil. They were extremely skillful when they came. So this idea that somehow slaves benefited from slavery is ridiculous. Do you know that when slavery ended, the Freedmen's Bureau was set up? And one of the functions of the Freedmen's Bureau was to ensure that lost family members could be found. Africans or Black Americans at that time, once they got their freedom, went throughout the entire country searching for family members. Why? Because they were sold off. They were sold off. Benefit. What is a benefit? Somehow, if I gave you a job today and I told you you were not going to earn any money, that I was going to dictate where you live, when you eat, when you work, dictate your whole liberty, your whole freedom, would you see a benefit in that? I mean, it's outrageous what we're hearing now in today's society. I can't believe that we are still entertaining this foolishness that has happened. But why? Why is there an attack, an all-out attack on Black and brown people? Why have we become the center of all the things in education that you could have a problem with? You have a problem with the Black story. Well, because the Black story is a story of America's guilt. It's a story of America's failure. And it's also a story of America's continuing race problem. That's the issue. And you can't rewrite history with this revisionist that DeSantis and others are trying. It just further rips away at the fabric of our democracy. But this is the Barack Obama, post-Barack Obama effect. We saw it after Reconstruction in 1877 when it ended. We saw the rise of the KKK. We saw black codes. We saw Jim Crow. We saw a pushback. Right. And you might not know, but slightly before that, I mean, blacks, when they got free, they got into politics and black males started voting. Only black males, not females, started voting, which is a whole nother show, which is crazy. But there was a pushback. Why? Because the system wanted to correct itself. And as always, folks, what I need you to do is ensure that you hit that like button for me, subscribe, and hit that notification so you don't miss any of my content. If you can do that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. Share the show so that we can get more folks listening and involved. And I, as always, you know, I love to hear from you. You can hit me up on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, Twitter. I guess Twitter now is X. Yeah, man, I don't know what that dude doing over there. So, but anyway, so we have this attack. Why? Because it's the fear of the truth. The truth. The truth. You know what the good book says. Only the truth will set you free. It's the truth. Because lies entangle you. Lies paralyze you. And that's what this nation is. This nation is a nation full of paralysis. And it's due to the fact that we will not accept the truth. We go so far as to try to rewrite the truth to fit our own dominant culture's narrative. It's a fear, because if we truly embrace the truth, then we have to deal with our problems. We can't simply brush them aside. And folks, we have been fighting this battle from the beginning. It's not going anywhere. Why? Because people will not rest until justice happens in this country. Hey, you know, we this generation will move on to the next phase of whatever you might believe might happen. But there's a new generation that will not rest. They will continue to fight. So you had this pushback, right? And we can read about that pushback, but the pushback, the post-Obama pushback, let me talk about that for a minute. I was at a university in Arizona, and a colleague of mine, this is when Barack was just running, and I made the comment that I would like to see him elected, but if that happens, there's going to be a great pushback. And this individual was very upset with me. She said, I can't believe you would say such a thing. We are moving into a post-racial society. And that was back in, I think, 07. And I wish I could find her now, because I told her then, you don't understand, whenever there is progress, there's always a pushback. The LGBTQ plus community is experiencing that right now. Okay. So this pushback is to prevent the reoccurrence of a Barack Obama, to prevent the upward movement of women in our society. We can see the pushback that's happening right now with the LGBTQ plus community legislation, really, against drag shows. Are you, with all the serious problems we have in this country, we have elected officials that have made it their job to go after people that are not even doing anything to them. Why? Because they see America is changing. See, so this post-Obama pushback, right? But then you had George Floyd. Oh, that really terrified them. Because not only was there an uprising in America, but there was an uprising around the world for the liberation, for the reparations, for the acknowledgement of what has happened to Black and brown people in this country. And folks, they didn't like it. What we see is the major pushback now in our time. This idea that we're going to rewrite the history books. We're going to not tell your story. Matter of fact, you can't teach it because it makes white boys and girls feel bad about who they are. So what was done to us, if we tell the story, it makes them feel bad. So therefore, you can't tell the story. And furthermore, we're going to rewrite the story in a way that is palatable to those who are hearing it. You know how offensive that is? You know, nobody around today owns slaves. Nobody around today should feel guilty for America's history. Yet those who are benefiting off of a privileged status which came out of slavery, Jim Crow, convict leasing, black codes, lynching, mass incarceration, those who benefit from a system that gives them, right, gives them privileges, unearned privileges, I might add, simply because of the color of their skin, have a responsibility, a societal responsibility along with ourselves, to make sure that justice finally comes. You see, white supremacy now is in full swing. It's in full swing. And it's interesting because the educated, Ron DeSantis, he actually is a graduate from Yale and Harvard Law School, from Yale College and Harvard Law School. He's an intelligent person. You have the intelligent people dictating what less intelligent or less educated people should think about the world and the world around them. And they're using the media. They're using Fox and other Newsmax and other right-wing outlets to reinforce this narrative, right? But they're the educated. Because when you look at Trump voters, again, I'm not making this stuff up. You can Google this stuff yourself. The average Trump voter is not well educated. Now, one thing I will say about education, a good education, let me just say that. Give a shout out to my two alma maters, to the University of Wisconsin Parkside, University of Wisconsin Milwaukee, my undergrad and my graduate degree. I got an excellent education. I just did. And it helps you to critically think about the world around you. It challenges you to question those things that you have so easily believed. Even those things that mama and daddy taught you. Education says, challenge that. Let's reason that. Let's logically look at that. But we have an educational system today that says no. Ron DeSantis has went so far as to, at Disney, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs were abolished. So Walt Disney's governing district, which DeSantis appointed people over, they've gotten rid of DEI. Okay. So here are Republicans that talk about private industry and not getting engaged in letting capitalism and the invisible hand of Adam Smith, the economists, take place, that government should not get involved in the private sector. That's all the Republicans are doing nowadays. It's telling folks you can't do drag shows. Telling women. That's the pushback too. I didn't even mention that, the Me Too movement. When we seen women finally stand up and say no more. No, we're going to hold you accountable. What happened? Now we got the Supreme Court stripping away a woman's right to choose, a woman's right over her own body. It's a pushback. That's how the system works. And so when we look around this country today and we say, how do we solve these enormous problems? Well, you can't. You can't when you have people in charge that ignore the problems, or they revise the problems, or they make you the problem, right? I mean, how many, when you think about the pushback against the Black Lives Matter movement, Blue Lives Matter, all these counter movements, that's why it's important to know history, because every time you have a movement, you have a counter movement. And the problem with the first movement for liberation, determination, is that those movements although people coalesce around them, they don't have the same power structure as the counter movement. So the counter movement makes the laws. That's why we see anti Black history legislation being enacted. That's why we see anti LGBTQ plus legislation being enacted. That's why we see all of these initiatives to redistrict and not allow for Black majority districts. Why? Because if they allow for these things to take place, then the truth would get out. Aren't you tired of people lying to you? Aren't you tired of people withholding information from you? Now, the information is all out there, but as Americans, our lives are so busy. We're so caught up in the kind of the vanity of celebrity and this, that, and the other thing and some of us have legitimate reasons. We're working, we're taking care of families and so forth. You don't have the time. That's why the educational system must be fixed. It must be fixed, folks, because if it's not fixed, then we will further see our democracy crumbling. And trust me when I say to you, we are seeing the birth pains of American democracy collapse. Is happening right before our eyes. You see, without learning and accepting the truth of our history, American democracy will never, let me be clear, will never survive. History will speak of us. Somewhere in the distant future, a scribe will reach down deep into the archives of our time, and what will she find? Will she discover that we overcame our differences? Will she find that out of many, we became one? Or will she find that we solved nothing and remain a divided peoples? Yes, history will speak of us.